There's a story our sages told, whispered from one generation to the next, about a man who could never understand why fortune always seemed to pass his home by. His name was Yitzhak ben Meir, a modest craftsman who worked hard, gave charity when he could, and prayed with sincerity. Yet no matter how much he toiled, his business never flourished. He fixed shoes, mended belts, repaired saddles, but gold never stayed in his hands for long. One evening, as the winter wind howled through the narrow streets of his village, Yitzhak sat before his cold stove, wondering aloud, "What sin have I committed that my doors remain closed to blessing?" His wife, Rivka, looked at him gently and said, "Maybe it's not what you've done wrong, but what you've forgotten to do right." The next morning, desperate for answers, Yitzhak went to see Rabbi Eliezer, the elder sage of the town. The rabbi listened quietly, nodding as Yitzhak poured out his frustration. When the craftsman finished, Rabbi Eliezer smiled faintly and said, "Yitzhak, tell me about your home." "My home?" Yitzhak blinked. "It is small. 2 rooms, a little stove, a few shelves. We keep it clean and humble." The rabbi's eyes narrowed. "And your doorway? Tell me, what do you see each time you leave or return?" "The doorway?" Yitzhak hesitated. "Wood, a frame, a latch. What else should I see?" Rabbi Eliezer leaned forward. "A home's doorway is more than wood and nails. It is the threshold through which blessing enters and leaves. If the doorway is not honored, the blessing turns away. Have you placed a mezuzah upon it?" Yitzhak's face fell. "No. I meant to years ago, but I never got to it." The rabbi sighed. "That small neglect, my son, may be the reason wealth does not rest in your home. When you leave your house without remembering who guards it, you close invisible doors, not only of protection, but of prosperity." This story, though ancient, carries a timeless truth. In the Jewish way of seeing the world, every object, every act, and every space holds spiritual meaning. What we call luck, or fortune, is often the result of our alignment, or misalignment, with that meaning. The common home mistake is not a broken window or an unpaid bill. It is the quiet forgetting of sacred order, the subtle neglect of what connects the material to the spiritual. Sometimes it's as simple as treating our home like a shelter of walls, rather than a sanctuary of blessing. In Jewish tradition, the home is a miniature temple. It's where love is practiced, gratitude is taught, and daily acts become offerings. The moment we treat it casually, leaving it spiritually unguarded, we invite chaos, confusion, and scarcity. But let's not rush to superstition. The lesson isn't that a mezuzah is a magic charm, nor that missing one brings a curse. It's deeper. The mezuzah, the Sabbath candles, the blessing over bread. All these are reminders that prosperity begins not in the marketplace, but in the consciousness we bring to our homes. When we forget this, we fall into the same trap as Yitzhak, mistaking effort for alignment. He worked harder each year, but forgot to sanctify the doorway through which blessing could enter. In life, this doorway can be literal or symbolic. It can be our attitude, our gratitude, our discipline, or even the way we speak about what we have. Many people strive for wealth yet leave the spiritual door of their home unguarded, cluttered with negativity, unkind words, or careless habits. They may not realize that what blocks wealth is not an external enemy, but an inner disorder. The energy of abundance doesn't dwell in chaos. It settles where order, gratitude, and purpose are honored. The sages used to say, "A home without blessing is a roof without rain." That means no matter how grand the structure, it remains dry, lifeless, without the dew of divine favor. The question is, how do we invite that dew again? This reflection will explore that question through the wisdom of our ancestors. We'll uncover what it truly means to honor the doorway, how unseen habits may repel or welcome prosperity, and how to reopen the gates of blessing for an entire year and beyond. We'll walk through stories of merchants and mothers, rabbis and workers, each showing a different aspect of how small domestic choices echo in the heavens. And by the end, you'll understand why one simple change in your home's atmosphere can shift the flow of fortune itself. For now, remember this: every home breathes. It speaks in the way its owners live, in the tone of their voices, in the respect they give to time, order, and peace. When a home is filled with gratitude, it glows. When it is filled with noise and neglect, even gold turns to dust. Yitzhak learned this the hard way, but his story does not end there. What the rabbi told him next changed not only his fortune, but his entire understanding of what wealth really is. When Yitzhak left Rabbi Eliezer's study that morning, he carried more than advice. He carried a mirror. For the first time, he saw his home not as a place of exhaustion and effort, but as a living space that could either welcome or reject blessing. The rabbi's words echoed in his mind like a steady drum. If the doorway is not honored, blessing turns away. As he walked home through the narrow alleys, Yitzhak began to notice doorways everywhere. Some homes had a small scroll affixed at an angle, the mezuzah, shining faintly in the sunlight. Others, like his, stood bare. He realized something simple, yet profound. Those who treated their thresholds with reverence seemed to carry a quiet dignity in their lives. Their faces were calm, their steps sure. Even their misfortunes didn't seem to shake them. When he arrived home, Rivka was kneading dough for bread. He told her what the rabbi had said. She listened without interruption, her hands steady, her face thoughtful. "So you think the reason we've struggled is because of our doorframe?" she asked gently. "Not the wood," he replied, "but what it represents. We built a home of effort, but maybe not of awareness." That night, they decided to act. Yitzhak borrowed a small parchment from a scribe, a mezuzah scroll written by a man who had washed his hands in purity, spoken no idle words while writing, and sealed the holy name of GD with care. When Yitzhak brought it home, he didn't just nail it to the doorway. He paused, held his breath, and whispered, "May this home remember who guards it." The moment the mezuzah touched the wood, something shifted, not in the air, but in their hearts. For the first time in years, they felt their home wasn't just theirs. It was part of something higher. Weeks passed. Business did not suddenly boom, but Yitzhak noticed subtle changes. Customers who once ignored him began to greet him kindly. A neighbor who owed him money unexpectedly repaid part of the debt. Small streams of grace began to trickle in, as if some spiritual valve had been reopened. One evening, as he shared these thoughts with Rabbi Eliezer, the old sage smiled. "Now you understand," he said. "The mezuzah is not a superstition. It's a declaration that your home belongs to GD, that your work is service, and that your prosperity is partnership." "But Rabbi," Yitzhak asked, "why does forgetting such a small thing have such great consequence?" The rabbi leaned on his cane and said, "Because the universe is built upon alignment. When you neglect the sacred order, you turn your face from the source. Blessing does not vanish. It simply cannot find its way to a door that is closed." That night, Yitzhak reflected deeply. He realized that his doorway was not only the wooden frame of his house, but also the entrance to his heart, his speech, and his daily habits. Every time he left his home angry, he crossed a spiritual threshold unguarded. Every time he returned ungrateful, he left the door to blessing ajar, letting peace slip away. In truth, this is a lesson for all generations. Many people today, in their rush to achieve, forget to tend to their invisible doorways. They hurry to earn, to prove, to collect. But their homes are cluttered with resentment, comparison, and fatigue. They light their rooms with electricity, but not with blessing. Jewish wisdom teaches that prosperity is not a chase. It's an invitation. It arrives where gratitude dwells, where the home vibrates with purpose. The forgotten doorway represents every moment we fail to remember that connection. There is a saying from the Talmud, "When you enter your home, greet with peace." It sounds simple, almost trivial. But this one act can change the energy of an entire household. Because peace is not just a feeling. It is the foundation upon which all wealth stands. Without peace, even abundance feels empty. Yitzhak began to greet his home that way every evening. "Shalom to this house," he would whisper before stepping inside. And somehow, the very air seemed lighter. His children quarreled less, his wife smiled more. Work still required effort, but now that effort felt sacred, not desperate. We often imagine wealth as coins, properties, and gains. Yet in Jewish thought, true wealth begins at the doorway, with awareness, gratitude, and order. Before a man can hold abundance in his hands, he must first hold peace in his home. Rabbi Eliezer once explained this mystery to his students. When a man honors his doorway, he tells heaven, "I am ready to receive," and heaven responds in kind. Perhaps this is why some families seem to live in constant scarcity, not because they lack effort, but because they forgot to honor what connects them to blessing. Their homes become silent battlegrounds of frustration. Their meals are eaten without gratitude. Their doorways, bare not of wood but of intention, remain spiritually closed. Yitzhak's story reminds us that correction begins not in the world outside, but in the first step we take when crossing our own threshold. To bless the door is to bless the day. To remember who guards it is to remember that we are never alone. If we carry this awareness, even the smallest home becomes a palace. As weeks turned into months, Yitzhak's home began to change in ways that could not be measured by coins. The air felt calmer. Arguments became rare. Even the children, once restless and noisy, began to speak with gentleness. It wasn't that life had suddenly become easy. Rather, it had become aligned. One evening, Rabbi Eliezer visited. He stepped into the small house and immediately smiled. "I feel peace here," he said. "Do you notice it too?" Yitzhak nodded. "Yes, Rabbi. But I still don't understand how something so small, a scroll on a door, could create such transformation." The rabbi took a seat, his eyes glinting with quiet humor. "In Yitzhak," he said, "a home is not made of stone, it's made of words. The words you speak, the thoughts you entertain, the gratitude you express, these are the bricks of its unseen architecture. A mezuzah is only the outer sign of an inner order." He paused, letting the fire crackle between them. "When you align the physical with the spiritual, you make space for blessing to rest. But when the home is filled with complaint, neglect, or fear, blessing feels unwelcome. It turns away, not in anger, but in sorrow." That night, after the rabbi left, Yitzhak thought about what hidden architecture meant. He looked around his home. The table where they ate, the lamp that flickered during prayers, the bed where his children slept. Each object, he realized, was a vessel, a container for meaning. He began to see that wealth was not measured by possessions, but by presence. A poor man who eats his bread with gratitude is richer than a king who eats in bitterness. For gratitude builds a palace no storm can destroy. Days later, Yitzhak visited a nearby town to sell his leather goods. There he met another craftsman, Moshe, who mocked him for wasting time on religious customs. "Do you think a little scroll will make you rich?" Moshe laughed. "Work harder, my friend. The Almighty helps those who help themselves." Yitzhak smiled gently. "Perhaps, but I've learned that the Almighty also helps those who make room for him in their work." Moshe waved his hand dismissively. "You're chasing blessings that don't exist." Months later, Moshe's business burned down in a careless fire. No one knew exactly how it started. Some said it was the oil lamp left too close to the leather scraps. Others whispered it was envy that had drawn misfortune. Yitzhak visited him, offering help. When Moshe asked how he managed to stay afloat despite hardships, Yitzhak said softly, "Maybe it's not about staying afloat. Maybe it's about keeping your door open to blessing." Moshe looked puzzled. But deep down, something stirred. Jewish wisdom teaches that the home is the first sanctuary. Long before the temple in Jerusalem was built, every Jewish family created a sanctuary in their own dwelling. The table became an altar of gratitude, the bread a daily offering, and the doorway, the meeting point between heaven and earth. To forget this sacred design is to lose alignment with the source. It's not that wealth is punished away, but that the flow of blessing becomes blocked. Imagine water trying to pass through a clogged pipe. The blockage is not anger from above, but neglect from within. Rabbi Eliezer explained it this way: GD's abundance flows constantly, but we must keep our vessels clean. When the vessel is filled with anger, gossip, or dishonor, it cannot hold light. It spills. Many people fill their homes with things, furniture, decorations, noise, but forget to fill them with meaning. That emptiness echoes in unseen ways. Business deals fail, relationships sour, health declines. It's not superstition, it's spiritual law. A house cannot hold more light than its owners allow. Each Friday, they swept not only dust, but also bitterness from their hearts. They lit candles and welcomed peace like an honored guest. Their children began to understand that wealth was not found outside the home, but born within it. One evening, Rivka asked, "Do you think the mezuzah itself brings us fortune?" Yitzhak shook his head. "No, the mezuzah only reminds us to invite fortune in. Blessing comes when we remember who stands beyond the door." The next morning, Yitzhak walked through his village and saw many bare doorframes. Houses where laughter had faded, where people worked hard but never seemed content. He felt a quiet sadness. Not because they lacked money, but because they had forgotten the hidden architecture of blessing. The harmony between effort and awareness. To live without that awareness is to live like a man building a palace on sand. But to live with it is to turn even a humble hut into a kingdom. The rabbis teach, when the divine presence dwells in a home, every corner shines. That presence doesn't arrive through miracles. It arrives through small acts, gratitude before meals, gentle words between spouses, honesty in business, generosity to the poor. These are beams and pillars of invisible wealth. The same can be said for us today. Many homes appear luxurious, but are spiritually hollow, full of technology, but empty of blessing. The wealth that endures does not glitter. It glows. Rabbi Eliezer once told his students, "There are two kinds of rich men, those who count coins and those who count blessings. Only the second keeps what he gains." When Yitzhak looked back months later, he realized that his luck had changed not because the world had shifted, but because he had. His home had become a vessel that could hold abundance, not only financial, but emotional, spiritual, and communal. He finally understood the rabbi's wisdom. Prosperity is not earned, it is hosted. Spring arrived in Yitzhak's village, and with it came renewal, not only of the fields, but of hearts. His little workshop, once quiet and empty, now buzzed with life. Customers came not just to buy, but to talk, to share their worries, to feel the peace that seemed to dwell in his space. Something invisible had changed. One day, as he repaired a saddle, a merchant from another town stopped by. "Yitzhak," he said, "I heard your business is thriving again. Tell me your secret. Did you find a new supplier, change your prices?" Yitzhak smiled. "I changed my doorway." The merchant laughed. "Your doorway? You're joking." "No," said Yitzhak, still smiling. "I began to treat my home and my work as sacred ground. I no longer rush in and out without thought. I greet my threshold with gratitude, and it greets me back." The merchant shook his head, half amused, half curious. But later, as he left, he glanced at the small scroll on Yitzhak's doorframe and touched it gently. "Maybe I'll try that," he murmured. That simple act, a small acknowledgement of something greater, is how transformation begins. Because wealth does not follow effort alone, it follows awareness. The spirit that guards a home is the consciousness of those who live within it. The Talmud says, "A home in which Torah is spoken is a fortress against misfortune." What this means is not that we must be scholars, but that our speech itself must become sacred. When words of kindness and gratitude echo in a house, the walls absorb blessing. When words of anger or gossip fill it, they invite darkness instead. Yitzhak and Rivka began a nightly ritual. Before sleeping, they would share one gratitude aloud. Something small, something real. One night, Rivka said, "I'm thankful for the roof that doesn't leak." Another night, Yitzhak said, "I'm thankful for our children's laughter." It was such a simple act, but soon they noticed how easily peace came to their hearts. Rabbi Eliezer explained it this way. Every home has a gatekeeper, the energy created by the words spoken within. When gratitude becomes the language of the house, that gatekeeper stands strong. The rabbi's words echo through time. Today, many people wonder why their hard work doesn't lead to stability or joy. They search for external solutions, more hours, more skills, more luck, while forgetting the inner architecture that makes abundance possible. The problem isn't outside, it's at the door. When we wake up without gratitude, speak without kindness, or eat without blessing, we close that door little by little. But when we return to awareness, lighting candles, speaking softly, giving thanks, we reopen it. It's no coincidence that in Jewish homes, blessings accompany every daily act: waking, eating, washing hands, even leaving the house. Each blessing says the same thing. I remember that my life is not random, it's guided. And when you remember that, you invite guidance to continue. There's an old saying, if you want your home to shine, let your words be its light. If you're enjoying this reflection, subscribe to the channel and leave your comment. Your thoughts help us keep these stories alive. One evening, as twilight painted the sky gold, Yitzhak's son asked, "Father, what does the mezuzah say?" "It reminds us," Yitzhak said, "that GD is one, everywhere, even here at our door. It reminds us to love him with all our heart, soul, and might." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "So it's like saying hello to GD every time we come home?" Yitzhak smiled. "Exactly." The boy reached up to touch the little scroll. "Then I'll say hello too." That moment, small, pure, and full of wonder, captured the essence of Jewish prosperity. It isn't about magic, it's about relationship. To acknowledge the divine presence in our ordinary moments is to sanctify them, and sanctified moments attract abundance. As weeks passed, people from nearby towns began to visit Rabbi Eliezer, asking how they could bring the same peace into their homes. The rabbi always gave the same answer. Begin at your doorway. Before you leave, ask yourself, what spirit am I taking into the world? Before you enter, ask, what spirit am I bringing home? For Yitzhak, this became a lifelong habit. He stopped rushing through his days as if chasing something lost. Instead, he moved with reverence. Every action, opening his shop, lighting a candle, greeting a stranger, became a doorway of its own. One winter, when business slowed and fear returned, Yitzhak felt anxiety rising again. He went to the doorway, touched the mezuzah, and whispered, "You guarded me through abundance, guard me through doubt as well." And in that moment, peace returned. The true secret of the doorway of wealth is not mystical at all. It is the discipline of consciousness, the ability to remember, even in hardship, that we are part of something eternal. To align with that awareness is to stand in the current of blessing itself. When Yitzhak's son grew older, he too became a craftsman, and people said of him, "He was born under a lucky star." But those who knew the story smiled, for they understood that his father had not changed the stars, he had changed his doorway, and that change rippled across generations. Years passed, and Yitzhak's home became a quiet symbol in his village, a place people spoke of with warmth and curiosity. Travelers passing through would pause by his door, sensing something different, though they couldn't quite name it. They said the house had a soul, and indeed it did. Then came a harsh year, one that tested even the strongest hearts. The harvest failed, the river flooded, many shops closed. Fear and scarcity swept across the land like a cold wind. For the first time in years, Yitzhak's workshop stood empty. One evening, as he sat by the fire, Rivka said softly, "Perhaps our blessing has ended." Yitzhak shook his head. "Blessing does not end. It only hides when we stop looking for it." Still, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. Day by day, Yitzhak watched neighbors lose hope. He saw good men turn bitter, friends begin to quarrel over crumbs. The spirit of the village was closing its doors. Desperate for guidance, Yitzhak went again to Rabbi Eliezer. The old sage was frail now, but his eyes still shone with steady light. "Rabbi," Yitzhak said, "I have done everything you taught me. I honor the doorway, I keep my words clean, I thank GD each morning. Yet the world outside has turned dark. What am I to do when blessing seems gone from the earth?" Rabbi Eliezer leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then you must keep the door open, even when no one is knocking." Yitzhak frowned. "Open to what?" "To faith," said the rabbi, "to patience, to the belief that GD's hand works even when unseen. There are seasons when the river of abundance flows visibly, and seasons when it flows beneath the ground. But if you close your heart in the dry season, the waters will not find their way back. Yitzhak left those words echoing in his mind. When he returned home, he did something unusual. He opened his front door and left it open for a while. Snow drifted in, the wind whistled, and Rivka looked at him as if he'd gone mad. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Leaving room for hope to return," he said quietly. That evening a knock came at the door. It was a traveler, soaked and trembling from the cold. Yitzhak brought him inside, shared his bread and warmth, and offered him a bed for the night. In the morning the traveler thanked him and said, "I have no gold to give you, but I carry words that may help." He handed Yitzhak a note sealed in wax. It was a letter from a distant merchant offering trade in a neighboring city. A partnership that would soon revive Yitzhak's livelihood. Rivka wept with gratitude. "You see?" Yitzhak said, smiling through tears. "The door that stays open welcomes miracles." Word of this story spread, and once again people came to Rabbi Eliezer asking how Yitzhak's fortune had returned. The rabbi simply said, "Because he understood that blessing does not end with a year. It flows continuously, but only through those who keep their doors and hearts open." The following Sabbath, Yitzhak invited the entire village to his home. He set a long table, lit many candles, and said, "Tonight let us open not only our doors, but our hands." They shared food, stories, and laughter. For the first time in months, joy filled the air like spring after a hard winter. That night, the rabbi smiled from afar. "Now the village has learned," he murmured, "that the true mezuzah is not on the doorpost, but in the heart that remembers who blesses it. There is deep wisdom in this. The year the door stayed open became a legend, not because wealth returned, but because faith did." Yitzhak's Yes Act symbolized something larger than survival. It represented trust in the unseen order of life. In our time, we too face years when doors seem closed, jobs lost, health shaken, opportunities vanished. We may think, the blessing has left me. But perhaps it's only waiting for us to reopen the spiritual threshold. The same law applies. Keep your door open in faith, even when reason says close it. When gratitude seems foolish, practice it anyway. When fear tells you to hide, choose generosity. These are acts of resistance against despair, and heaven honors such courage. Once, a student asked Rabbi Eliezer, "How can I tell if my home is blessed?" The rabbi answered, "If peace greets you at the doorway, and you feel richer walking in than walking out, your home is blessed." Yitzhak lived by that measure for the rest of his life. He was never the wealthiest man in silver, but people said he was the richest in light. And that light spread to his children, his apprentices, his neighbors, until even after his passing, people would still touch his doorframe and whisper a blessing. That is the power of one man who refused to let his doorway close, even in darkness. Years after Rabbi Eliezer passed away, Yitzhak became the village elder, not by title, but by wisdom. People came to him for counsel on all matters: work, family, faith, fear. And whenever they did, he would tell them, "Before we speak of anything else, tell me, what stands at your doorway?" Some would answer, "Just wood and stone." Others would smile and say, "A reminder that blessing lives here." Yitzhak would nod. "Then you already know half the secret." By then his hair was white, and his hands trembled with age, yet his eyes were steady. The same calm that comes from living in alignment. His home remained simple, his possessions modest, but his peace unshakable. That peace, people said, was his true fortune. In one evening, a young merchant visited him. "Master Yitzhak," he said, "I've worked hard for years, but wealth slips through my fingers. I give charity, I keep the Sabbath, I even have a mezuzah, but still I struggle. Tell me, what am I missing?" Yitzhak looked at him kindly. "When you touch your mezuzah," he asked, "do you feel the presence that watches over you, or do you merely touch it out of habit?" The young man hesitated. "I suppose out of habit." "Then that," said Yitzhak, "is your missing piece. The mezuzah itself cannot help you if your heart is absent. Blessing flows not from symbols, but from sincerity. The door may hold a scroll, but the heart must hold awareness." He leaned closer. You see, wealth that depends on symbols can be lost. But the wealth that comes from gratitude, order, and kindness, that wealth cannot be taken. It multiplies even in hardship. The merchant frowned. So it's not about luck? Luck? Yitzhak chuckled softly. Luck is what the unwise call divine timing. The wise call it alignment. He told the young man the story of the hard winter when he left his door open for hope to enter. If I had waited for signs of blessing before believing, the blessing would never have come. The open door was my faith made visible. That night, the merchant walked home slowly, repeating those words. Faith made visible. In time, Yitzhak's teachings spread far beyond his village. His story traveled from town to town, becoming a parable for generations. Parents told it to their children before bed. Merchants repeated it in markets. Rabbis quoted it in sermons. The common home mistake, they said, was not forgetting the mezuzah, but forgetting its meaning. To neglect the spirit behind the practice is to close the door of wealth for an entire year, and sometimes for a lifetime. But to remember, even for a moment, that one's home is a sanctuary of gratitude, is to reopen that door again. Years later, when Yitzhak's time on earth neared its end, his family gathered around him. Father, his son said, what should we do when you're gone? Yitzhak smiled weakly. Keep your door open to guests, to gratitude, to GD, that is enough. He passed away with those words, and the very next morning, the village awoke to a sunrise unlike any they had seen before, bright, golden, almost alive. People said it was as if heaven itself had opened its door to welcome him. From that day, on the anniversary of his passing, villagers would gather by his home. They would stand before the old wooden door, touch the mezuzah, and whisper, May our doorways stay open. And somehow, year after year, prosperity found its way back to their town. Time carried the story far beyond that village. Even now, centuries later, the message remains. We may not live in small villages or work as craftsmen, but the principle still holds. Our homes mirror our consciousness. When our thoughts are clean, our words kind, our gratitude steady, the doorway of wealth stays open. The door can close in many ways, through neglect, arrogance, resentment, or forgetfulness, but it can reopen just as easily, with awareness, humility, and love. So ask yourself, what lives at your doorway? Do you rush through it with complaints or pause to bless the day? Do you fill your home with noise or with words that build peace? Remember, blessing is never far away. It waits, patient and generous, just beyond the threshold, ready to enter the moment you align your heart with gratitude. This is the true secret Yitzhak discovered. Wealth is not something you earn, it is something you host. And to host it, you must prepare the space. Clean the heart, honor the home, speak kindly, act with purpose. That is the eternal invitation to abundance. In every generation, this wisdom reappears, sometimes as a story, sometimes as a whisper, sometimes as a simple question. Have you honored your doorway today? If you have, the year ahead will not lack for light. In Jewish wisdom, the home is more than shelter. It is a sanctuary. When we treat our dwellings as sacred spaces, we open invisible doors through which prosperity, peace, and purpose enter. The wealth that endures is not measured in gold, but in gratitude, not in gain, but in giving. Final CTA. If this message made sense to you, subscribe to the channel, leave your comment, and share your thoughts. What do you think? What does your own doorway of blessing look like today?